I'm quitting Star Wars Legion and I'm going to be focusing on Star Wars Shatterpoint. And the key question is, should you? Now, obviously, this actually is going to really depend on you, the kind of player you are, what you're looking for in a game, but I'm going to explain my situation and the reasons that I've made this decision. Now, I know some of you will be like, weren't you just turning this into sort of like a battle report channel? Yes, but I'll explain what's happening with that at the end. So if you've not seen by now, Atomic Mass Games are releasing a game called Star Wars Shatterpoint. It is basically going to be a skirmish Star Wars game, probably on a 3x3 board or smaller. You can think of it as basically being Marvel Crisis Protocol, but with a Star Wars skin, even though the rules I'm sure are going to be like considerably different. Just as sort of like a reference point, that's what I would personally use. And there are some differences between Shatterpoint and Star Wars Legion, of course. The miniatures, even though they visually look sort of similar, especially like models like Kenobi, the game is obviously going to play very differently. The size and feel of the game is going to be quite different. The miniatures of Shatterpoint do look to be a little bit bigger at maybe like 40mm, but ultimately they're both tabletop war games using the Star Wars license, okay? And I'm going to explain first what I'm not that keen on when it comes to Star Wars Legion. I do think Star Wars Legion is actually a great game. I would much rather play it than say something like Warhammer 40k. Now, there's a few reasons why I'm personally quitting. One of them is rules bloat. Quite frankly, I was a little bit fed up with X-Wing having so many like special keywords that all did different kinds of stuff. I find it hard to remember and I don't really find it very fun to play with. Now, I appreciate the counterpoint to that is you have to keep the game feeling fresh, and I'm pretty sure that Shatterpoint will eventually get to a complicated bit that I don't quite fully understand or comprehend. But Legion got there sort of quite quickly in my eyes. I was also a little bit fed up with imbalance in Star Wars Legion. Simply put, generally, the meta armies were considerably better than anything else. And what was meta consistently changed, and I just couldn't keep up with that. Granted, I'm not the kind of player these days who will ever try and keep up with that. It truly doesn't feel like everything is vaguely balanced. You could very much take a list that isn't terrible, but you could take it to a tournament and just get absolutely smashed. For some people, that's not a problem if you want to play meta, but if you just want to be like mid-table like me, it gets a little bit tiring. I also think that the missions are perhaps a little bit bland. They all sort of feel a little bit samey to me. I may be like being a little bit simple here, but it was generally either, oh, I need to move to the other side of the board, or I need to go to this objective, either take it or damage it or whatever. They made it better, obviously, when they added some more missions, but it just, I don't know, it didn't feel like there was enough randomness involved. Now, randomness obviously reduces like competitiveness, but I think the lack of randomness there sort of hurt the game personally. It was also a little bit disappointing in general to see Star Wars Legion when it's compared to something like Marvel Crisis Protocol. Marvel Crisis Protocol pretty much got released almost every month, right? In Legion, you only have like a certain number of factions, and if you play one faction, you could go for quite a while before you got any sort of like update for that faction. One thing that I possibly should have mentioned when it came to rules bloat in terms of like keywords and stuff like that, it also basically meant that the cards you had were often not really the right cards. Well, they were the right cards, but they didn't have the right rules on them. I think I was playing with Vader the other week and I was like, oh, actually, he's got stuff that he didn't used to have, and I need to remember it's the new one, not the old one that I'm playing with. I think he now has like Compel, right? Something like that. I can't exactly remember. And that's also a little bit tiring, like trying to print out rules and stuff like that. I just find it a little bit frustrating. There is another counterpoint to that, is I also don't really like, say, like Games Workshop methodology of doing this, where they sell you a book, then they do an errata, then they do a supplement. I think that's also quite frustrating. Hopefully a game like Shatterpoint can be a sort of middle ground, at least I hope so. Might not be the case, but it is what it is. I'm also moving to Shatterpoint because of the time. I don't really want to spend 2 to 3, maybe even 4 hours on a tabletop war game unless I'm really enjoying it. I think my main problem with Star Wars Legion is, and this is probably like just a subjective point, it always felt like it was like a really strategic tactical battle, but it's always sort of felt like just shooting at each other. And I don't know, I'm just not interested in shooting at each other from range being the main way of spending 3 hours. Now, I might have the game completely wrong. It's completely fine to disagree with me, by the way. I am not claiming that these are absolute reasons that people shouldn't like Star Wars Legion. That's not true. I still like Star Wars Legion. What I am saying is those are the reasons that I'm personally sort of losing interest. Weirdly, I think Star Wars Legion is probably still the best competitive game. For me, if you are a really good player of Star Wars Legion, you will beat almost anybody else who isn't also a really good player of Star Wars Legion. And I think ultimately that's a good thing for competitive players. But I've got a bit older, I have a wife, I have a kid. I'm sort of looking for more beer and pretzels kind of games. Because I spoke about time, I have another interest in basically playing Warhammer Fantasy when that comes back with the old world. Those games are going to take ages. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm probably going to go to tournaments, pick my list, and just run it at people. I'm not going to think too much about it. There'll be a little bit of strategy and stuff like that. but I'm just going to run it at people and let the dice be dice. Yes, the best players in that game will also beat me. It's not being beat that's the problem. It's like having fun whilst being beaten, if that makes more sense. I've come to the point where as a dad, beer and pretzels kind of gamer, I actually like the randomness. I used to think Warcry was bad because it was too random. Now I think actually it's a great game. I think really you have to play games that align with what you're looking for, and Star Wars Legion doesn't really align with what I'm looking for anymore. I'm also not that big into the hobby. I'm not the kind of guy who really enjoys painting. I would much rather paint 10 models than 20 or 30 or 40 models. So having this opportunity to be able to play like completely different armies in Shatterpoint very easily because there's not that many models, yeah, like I can get behind that. There are going to be problems with Shatterpoint as well, by the way. I think the cost of the game is going to be akin to sort of like Marvel Crisis Protocol, which will be quite high if you try and buy everything. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Star Wars Shatterpoint will be perfect. Of course it won't, but I think it aligns more with what I'm looking for. So what's happening to me and this channel? I hear almost nobody ask. So I was making this channel with Tim. We changed the name to Reckless Diversion. The plan was to do Star Wars Legion battle reports. Well, I did 2 of them, and I was the one who was like, hey Tim, I'm not really enjoying this the way that I thought I was going to. I really enjoyed the games with Tim because Tim's really nice, and the games were really fun. The back and forth banter that we had off camera and stuff like that, it's just enjoyable. In a way, the game was getting in the way of my experience though, if I'm honest. Just the way that it plays, I just realised that it wasn't really for me. And not only was it not for me, we were spending even longer playing because we had to record it. So a game that would normally take 2 to 3 hours, it was taking us 4 to 5 to even 6 hours. And that for me was just a lot of energy. I'd probably rather go to a tournament and just play like mid-range people, that sounds bad, but people at my level, or, you know, low end, because I'll be at the low end as well, and just have a bit of fun. And maybe play Tim. That's actually how me and Tim met. We met at a tournament. I think we were like mid-table at the time. We just enjoyed the game. So basically at the weekend I was like, Tim, I'm not enjoying this. I think like I'm gonna have to like knock it on the head. And I had no plans on making Star Wars Legion content. I was pretty much done quitting. I was like, that's it, right, whatever. And then Atomic Mass Games brings me back with Shatterpoint. It just sort of ticks all the right boxes. Yes, I'm still going to play Warhammer Fantasy, and that may end up annoying me for a whole different like set of reasons. It's Games Workshop after all. But Shatterpoint is now where I'm going to put my energy. Not lots of energy. I'm going to play it relatively casual. And you know what? I'm actually really looking forward to it. I might even be able to get the wife involved because we can probably just play it at home on the kitchen table. And that to me is exciting. So should you quit Star Wars Legion? Probably not. If you're enjoying Star Wars Legion, don't quit. It's not going to go anywhere. Yes, I do think Shatterpoint is slightly going to hurt Star Wars Legion. It's already caused one person who, if I was still playing Star Wars Legion, this might have been the deciding final blow. But it's already going to cause some people to be like, hey, you know what? I would rather play Star Wars Shatterpoint than Legion. But on the other front, maybe Shatterpoint will get more eyes in front of people and they'll be like, oh, I want to scale it up. I'll go play Star Wars Legion. Ultimately, it might be a bit of back and forth. I personally think that it's going to actually hurt Legion in the long run, but the proof is in the pudding. Let's see what happens. Let me know your thoughts. I don't want hate. Don't give me hate. If you're enjoying Star Wars Legion, play it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope the game is supported. Please go ahead and enjoy it. If you want to unsubscribe, fine. I get it. It is what it is. But one thing I always try and be with you is honest. And that's my honest thoughts right now. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.